Buddy Callum here, and on this channel in the past we have gone over a variety of strange and unusual vehicles, but today I wanted to show you guys one of my own, one of the vehicles that I've owned for a very long time, and the thing that really got me into both travelling and camper vans, but also strange and unusual vehicles. And I've always wanted to be able to say that this is my 1989 Suzuki Super Carry, and it is the smallest camper van in the world. Now, I know that that is quite a controversial term. I'm sure there's a lot of you right now typing out furiously in the comments about how you've seen a tuk-tuk with a full camper van conversion on the top, or you've seen a Nissan Micra that somebody's been living out of, or a double bed that's been fitted onto a motorcycle. But what's important about this tiny 3.1 metre long micro van is that it is officially registered with the DVLA, the driving authority in the UK, the government agency that looks after vehicles that are on the road, as a motorhome. It's registered as a motorhome. It can be insured as a motorhome or a camper van as well, and I have owned it since about 2015. It is it's just an unbelievable vehicle. I mean, look at it. Like, it's got a pop-top roof. It's got a full electrical system. It's got cupboards. It's got a kitchen. It's got a dining room area. It's got a fold-out bed. It's got 81,000 miles on it. I mean, can you even believe that this is driven so far? Anyway, I wanted to show you guys this van. I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. I wanted to go over everything from the weird driving to the living and working inside one of these, show you underneath and all the strange and unusual features that it has, and generally just kind of give you the exclusive, definitive tour of one of the strangest and smallest camper vans found anywhere in the world. I don't know how much longer I'm going to own this thing for. Sadly, I think my tenure with this vehicle is coming to an end. And, you know, it's a fun video, I think, for me to make, but it's also a little bit of a record that I can refer back to in the future if, you know, one day I don't happen to have this vehicle anymore. But what we'll do a tour. We'll start in the driving position, the cab at the front there. We'll then move to the living room area, and I can show you a little bit about living and working inside of this van and just go over everything. I'll leave time codes in the description below, or chapters in the video player, so that you can have a look at it and jump around if you want to. But let's get started. Oh, the sound of hollow, cheap Japanese steel. So for anyone who's not aware, these things are microvans. And of course, microvans are a very specific kind of designation of vehicle that emerged out of Japan as a result of their quite restrictive K-car regulations. So the microvans presented themselves as small, economical cars that had plenty of space in them for kind of day-to-day city transport and travel, and as a result became very popular around the world. These things are still found all over the place, and the Suzuki Super Carry is probably the most well-known of the lot. There's also ones made by Daihatsu, by Honda, but the Suzuki Super Carry is probably most well known in the UK is actually the Bedford Rascal. So in, I think, 1986, General Motors acquired the license to produce the Suzuki Super Carry down in their factory in Luton in England. Now, they produced two models which were identical apart from the badging. This is a Suzuki Super Carry. It was made and it was exported usually to Europe, where the Suzuki name was a little bit more well known. But in the UK, they were rebadged as the Bedford Rascal. Now, there is no differences to them apart from slight differences to the badging and the kind of front styling of the vehicle itself. They were made up until, I believe, the early 90s, and then they switched to the 9th generation. I believe we're now on the, I think, 11th generation of Suzuki Super Carry. It's quite amazing how long-lasting this design has been. Of course, one of the most distinctive things about it is that it's a cab-over design. So you're sitting on top of the wheels, and the wheel arches for one, but you're also sitting on top of the engine. It makes for quite an interesting driving experience when you're turning and maneuvering this van, because the wheels are actually a little bit behind you. But it also means that you've got a completely flat load floor stretching into the back. So it's not like a VW bus in which the engine is located in the rear. You've got quite a lot of space back there, good flat load floor for loading in workers' tools and various things, because, like I say, a lot of the time these were used as kind of cheap, economical work vans and delivery vans. In fact, the reason I became aware of the Bedford Rascal, or the Suzuki Super Carry, was that in the 90s, these things were used as goods vans here on Raasay. So for those of you who aren't aware, I live on a very small, very beautiful little island called Raasay. And back in the 90s, the transport for goods and services and material coming over to Raasay was done with these little small vans. They were perfect for fitting on the small ferry. They tended to be Bedford Rascals, and my dad used to work on that ferry in the 90s, and I sort of fell in love with the van as a result. But I've always been a big fan of Suzukis. I've actually got a Suzuki Jimny right behind this car right now, and as a result, I saw this, the Bedford Rascal, something I'd always been obsessed with, but badged as the original Suzuki Super Carry designation, and I just knew that I had to have it. Now, I bought this in 2015. I bought it from someone down in Glasgow. Now, Glasgow's about a 5.5-hour drive away from where we are now, and you've got to obviously get on the ferry as well. So I went down and had a look at the van. I decided to buy it. I then drove back home. Myself and my dad collected a trailer. We drove all the way back down to Glasgow with a trailer. We loaded this van onto the trailer and we drove it all the way back home again. Now, we were taking it through Glencoe, through some of the most beautiful, gorgeous scenery in the world. You know, the kind of place that tourists come from all over the world to look at. And randomly, at one point for a large group of these tourists, a Suzuki Super Carry on the back of a car being towed by a Skoda Yeti was racing past them as well. Also, at one point during that journey, the pop top that I showed you guys earlier in the opening of this video accidentally released itself, and like a gigantic sail started to make the trailer swerve back and forth, and it was an experience, to say the least. We got it back home though. I unloaded it just a few meters over there away from us, and that was it. Transported to its new home. Now, in terms of the driving experience and how the driving experience goes in this van, needless to say, it's tight. It's cozy, as I would describe it. This is as far forward as your seat can go. Your feet come up against this metal barrier at the front, and it's got a weird shape to it, and what that actually is the back of the headlights protruding and sticking out. The crash and the crumple zone of this car is your feet and your legs, so you really do not want to be getting into a head-on collision with this vehicle. You don't want to be getting onto a side collision from this vehicle either, because they are very thin doors, and as you can see, there's not really that much space in the cab in general, lengthways or widthways. You also don't want to get hit from the back, because there is no headrest on these seats and your neck is probably going to snap instantly. However, a quick death, I suppose, is the best that you can hope for in the event of a crash. Now, the other thing is, this was a small economy van from the late 80s. It did not have many mod cons on it. You have an incredibly basic setup here for the hot and cold air, face and feet, and then your windscreen, 3 different speed settings, 4 if you include off, however, and then hot and cold air. Now, what I will say about this is, well, one, the radiator on this doesn't really work that well. You can get hot air out of it, however, because we're sitting on top of the engine generates a lot of heat, and most of that heat just rises up into the cabin here. Now, luckily, it's not fumes, you're not going to suffocate, but all you're really going to need is cold air blowing directly on your face, because if you're driving this thing in the summer, prepare to get it incredibly warm. Great if you're in Scotland though, it gets very cold around here. It means that you always are nice and toasty. I can't imagine it's very fun driving these vans though in Middle Eastern countries and in India, where they are very popular and where it also gets incredibly warm. Now, the other thing that's distinctive about this van, there's 2 things. One, 5-speed gearbox on this. I think that surprises a lot of people when they see it. A 4-speed was not that uncommon back then, especially for a very small van, especially for a cheap economy van like this. But something that really maybe does betray its slightly more budget beginnings is the choke. This thing has a manual choke that you can pull out. It makes for starting the van as a bit of an experience, and it's not usually something people are used to seeing, certainly nowadays. This was definitely the first car that I ever tried to start that had a choke. Obviously, I'm used to seeing it on lawnmowers, boats, outboard engines, chainsaws, that sort of thing. But yeah, seeing it on a van was certainly an experience, because something else I don't think I mentioned, this was the very first car I ever bought. This was my first car. I learned to drive in a relatively standard Vauxhall Astra, but that was my parents' car and it sort of became mine. But you know, I didn't go out and buy it. I didn't have that first car buying experience. My first car buying experience was in 2015 when I bought this absolutely ridiculous camper van. I think I actually have the photos from the original advert, and I mean, you maybe get an idea of my personality when you see that I saw those adverts and went, I'm buying that. So anyway, in terms of the interior, very Spartan, very basic. I didn't make many improvements in here. I certainly tidied it up. I cut some new flooring for it. I put some seat covers on it that I've got on here. The biggest improvement that I made was that I took out the cassette that was in here. There was a very poorly made cassette radio, and I fitted in a Bluetooth radio. And also I used my iPod. Still use this to this day. This is my iPod Classic. It goes everywhere with me. This now has a solid state drive and an upgraded battery. So this is my main music station. It was back then and it is still now. And the other thing that I used was this. If anyone was looking at this and wondering what it was, maybe some kind of sat-nav or some kind of third-party entertainment system. No, this is a PSP 3000, the best of the PSPs ever made. Now, I'm a big fan of the PSP. This was my all-in-one entertainment system when I was using this van, primarily back in 2015-16. The reason being, the 4G, 4G hadn't even arrived at that point, but the 3G signal up here, the internet signal on your phone, was pretty poor. So at night, if I was wanting to, I couldn't watch movies on Netflix or fire up anything like that. So what I used was my PSP. I have, my UMD Drive library of games, and I would sit here watching movies, listening to music, and playing a lot of video games on this thing. Best thing I ever owned, and this will be going to my new camper van as well. I will never go anywhere without my iPod, and I'll probably not go many places without a PSP as well. So that is the front, the driving experience. Let's move from the driving to the living. So welcome to the living room area, and I suppose you could split this van up into three main areas. You've got your driving at the front, you've got the sort of sitting room / living area, and then you've got your kind of kitchen and storage at the back there. Now, one of the big advantages of this van, that not every van has, is that it's a full pass-through. It's got two side doors on it, and most vans, or a lot of vans, tend to only have one side door, and normally located on this side. My new van, I've got a Nissan NV200 now, actually has a pass-through as well, and I was really keen in getting that because I really would have missed it from this van certainly as well. Now, in the middle here, there used to be two seats like this. If you ignore these cushions here, you'll see what the bench seat is. You've got these two, I will say, of their time styled cushions. All of this, I will say, is bespoke. It was made by, I believe, an Inverness-based camper van company. There's a badging on the back that relates to it. I don't think they exist anymore, but they did an amazing job because all of this is bespoke and made to fit on the inside of this van. And these designs for these seats I actually think are quite clever. As a normal seat, they're set up like this. This van is actually registered to carry 4 people. I would never drive with 4 people strapped into these seats. These are just wooden seats strapped to the floor. I don't know how on earth this passed any regulations of the DVLA, but anyway, you move this forward. It's on a little hinge. It is now extended out, and your seat can fold flat like this. And you might be able to see now where the bed comes into play, because what you do is you slide forward, and I'll demonstrate it. You slide forward the seat, the passenger seat that I was just sitting in, and you now have essentially a full span that you can lie on. You know what? It's not the most uncomfortable. I'll not say it's the most comfortable, but you would expect it to be more uncomfortable, and it's not. And I will say you can get a pretty good, I'm about 5'9", probably, maybe a little bit more than that, and I can lie in here relatively well. You have to think of this thing as just one step up from a tent, okay? You're not getting the full lovely sleeping experience of a Volkswagen California or something like that. What you are getting is something that is dry, that you don't have to set up as a canvas tent. Now, if you imagine, this used to be replicated on both sides. So you had your full single bed on this side and a full single bed on that side. Obviously, I wasn't picking up that much women with this, so I only needed the one bed in here, but it also meant that I had a lot more space to live and work here. I have slept 2 people in this, and what I did was I had one person sleeping here, and then I slept on the floor in a sort of L shape, or actually a little bit more like a sort of weird Tetris shape going up this way as well. But Again, I think personally a very comfortable sleeping experience. I always found this very comfortable. I always got a very good night's sleep in this. And the best thing about this is that you can drive off with this still all set up. One of the most annoying things about having a sort of camper van sleeping experience like this is the idea that you have to sort of have it all set up in camper van mode, and then you've got to deconstruct that before you can jump back on the road. There was a lot of occasions where I wanted to get on the road nice and quickly. I would just leave this set up as a bed, and then I would just drive off. The majority of the times that was happening because there was so many midges around in the morning that I had to get up. I had to really quickly get out of my bed. I had to then jump in the car and drive away as fast as possible because the midges in Scotland around the time that you were doing this sort of camping get very, very bad. Buyer beware if you are ever visiting the Scottish Highlands. Now, that is, like I say, the front sleeping area. The one thing that is not in here that I would normally keep in here is a cool box that would go next to the cupboard here. But generally speaking, that's how it worked. The other thing that can be set up in here is actually a table. And I'll show you how that's done right now. I'm just going to put this back together. The table is located at the back of the van. I'll take it out this way. So your table's located in the back of the van, stored quite neatly up against the back cupboard there. This is stored inside the cupboard. You open it up, slide it into this little space here, get a nice tight fit, and then you just mate it with this mounting point on the bottom, and then unfold it. And as you can see here, you have a relatively comfy space. Now, it's quite shaky. That's because I actually cut this to make it a little bit shorter. I don't tend to use that this often, or use this that often. What I would normally do is I would be eating kind of on the back here, on this little surface here. But it is there if you ever need it. I have served dinner numerous times by sliding this seat forward, putting some cushions in on the kind of base plate on the ground there, and then using that as a sort of seat, because there's no captain seat. You can't turn this around. And you could sit 2-3 people on here quite comfortably. Again, this works quite nicely if, say, you were having like a barbecue or something by the beach. You would set this thing up, you can open all of the doors, and you can just use this as another surface to store stuff. You can have your cool box here, all of that as well. But I think one of the more interesting additions to this van, because it's just such an unexpected feature. A lot of people just don't expect you to suddenly whip out a full table from this as well. And the fact that it folds away so you can keep it assembled, but also then kind of get out of the way, is again, I think, another really interesting addition. And I think it really shows you how much effort they put into the thought and the design behind this entire place. There's a lot of really clever ideas going on here. And I think the most clever ideas are found at the back here in the kitchen area. So let's go experience that next. So as I mentioned, this is a pop top, but also it doesn't have swing out doors at the back, but it's actually got a fully lifting door up here at the top. Now that means you've actually got a full-size canopy that you can stand underneath if it's raining. And also there's been times in which I've basically put a tarpaulin around the outside here to create a little sort of tent at the back. Now when you climb in here, the pop top actually gives you space to fully stand up. And there is full standing space running from the front all the way to the very back, because this entire pop top setup can actually be done by lifting the entire thing up as a kind of full square. I normally just keep it in this triangular setup because, one, if the wind is coming directly at you when you're stationary and set up, it blows over the top and kind of creates a bit more of an aerodynamic shape. And also because I just think it looks a little bit less goofy than having it fully set up. Although you've got to really just hand your pride in at the door when you start driving around in one of these. Now, this is a little kitchenette area, and I personally think that the design behind this, again, is incredibly clever and incredibly well optimized. I think this overall is the best designed part of the entire van. I think in some ways, although this cupboard is also fantastic and just so well made, the two don't work that well together because it's so tight back here, you can't really operate one or the other. You can't stand here and open this door. You can't really sit here that comfortably and work here at this little cabinet either. Probably if I was going to be improving on this design, I would either remove this or move this to over here or to one of the other sides and sort of block one of the doors. But I really kept it in place because I just thought it's such a unique design. I didn't really want to mess with it. I wanted to just really use and celebrate this bizarre little van more than anything else. Now let's have a closer look at this little kitchenette area. So if I open this up, you can get a better idea of the kitchen cabinet setup. And when I pull this down, you can now maybe better see the kind of kitchen setup that we have. Now, originally there was a full two-span burner here and stove set that also had a grill underneath as well in case you wanted to cook up some bacon or something like that. My priorities were a little bit more about storage than cooking because the two burner setup took up this entire area. It was almost as tall as the actual cabinet itself, and it also meant you had to have a huge gas canister stored underneath here. And of course this is pretty valuable storage space under here too. So what I did is I removed that and I put in a relatively cheap briefcase butane gas cooker. These things are all right to use. You basically have a gas cannon here that locks in place, well, when it works anyway, and then you can turn your burner on this way. It's a good setup, but as you can see, you've got this nice metal surface that you can wipe clean. Obviously you want to crack the windows slightly if you're doing this too because, well, one, you've got carbon monoxide and various things to deal with, but you also have a lot of condensation that could build up in here as well. But this nice wipe down surface I always thought was incredibly clever, and you could throw all of your food and tins and bits and pieces in here, your kettle for example. You could store it all, close it all up, and then walk away and not have to worry about it. Again, it works really well when you are trying to just get out of the way. When you maybe just need to quickly jump in the car and then drive off to a new location, you don't have to worry about packing all this stuff up. You can throw it in here, close it up, you can know that it's relatively safe and stored away, and then you can come back later, give all this a clean, and then be on your way. I think it's a really fantastic system, and I kind of miss it from my new van. I really think that this is one of the best designed kitchenette areas that you'll find on a little small van. Now, next to it, gets even better. This here is your full-sized sink setup. I say full-size, full-size for a tiny van, that is. Now this thing folds up, and a lot of people think that this is maybe one of those pressure pump ones, but it's actually not. It is fully electric. This is an electric tap that runs from a small water bottle that's stored underneath the cabinet here, and it runs out, unfortunately, onto the ground. I don't know when they converted this, whether grey waste and grey water wasn't really much of a concern, but this just empties straight onto the road. So what you want to pair with this is a bucket that you can stick underneath it to catch the grey water. Although I don't tend to use this very much. I'm not washing up anything other than maybe just rinsing out a cup. But certainly if you were using it for more extensive cooking, I wouldn't recommend just using it as is. But again, fantastic storage space. You dry this off, you keep it clean, you can put your mugs, you can put various bits of cutlery into this, fold this down, and again, you don't have to worry. It takes the storage space that normally would be reserved for cups and cutlery and stuff and kind of moves it into this little basin here. And again, it's the best design I've ever seen in a little small van. I absolutely love it. It leaves you again with plenty of storage under here in which you can keep, like I say, well, chopping boards, extra gas cans, the water is in the back there. And in here, where normally the gas can would have been, we've got a full shelf. I can keep my mug, which as you can see, I think at some point I must have tried to boil water in this mug, hence the reason it's very badly burnt under there and all sorts. Now, because I don't use this van very much anymore, all of this stuff is pretty much empty, but you could store a lot of stuff in there. And I used to have a cutlery kit that would all stay in here, all my mugs and everything ready to go. And all your food and everything was basically stored in one place at that point, and you didn't really have to worry about trying to fit it into other parts of the van. And it also left this space over here reserved for the clothing, cameras and other equipment. I'll have a look at that right now. So looking in here, you can get a better idea of, again, just how spacious a lot of this interior storage space is. Think about this in terms of a big camping rucksack, you know, a full-size hiking bag. That fits pretty handily into here with space then for things like camera gear, Ooh, a Nikonos 3, the greatest of all underwater cameras. And other bits and pieces that you can store up here quite safely without anything getting knocked around or damaged too much as well. You've also got a few shelves here. I used to keep a small handy butane heater in here as well, which again you have to use very carefully because of course carbon monoxide build up and various things too. You can also find my toolboxes and stuff in here. And this, funnily enough, is actually a power cable. One of the more unique aspects of this van, and one of the things that I found really quite surprising, is that I had a full electrical power setup when I bought it. So you could connect these into a camping site which provides you a 240 volts, same as kind of indoor household appliances here in the UK, and it would run it to these plugs up here, which you could then plug in your laptop or TV or radio or whatever it is that you wanted. Now, what I wanted to do was provide myself power outside of campsites, because a lot of the time I would be camping on small islands and little kind of laybys and various things around Scotland. So what I wanted was some extra power that I could use to charge my cameras and stuff without having to rely on the battery. Now the battery is just under the floor. It's an incredibly small battery. I didn't want to use that for anything other than starting the car. So what we did is we fitted a full leisure battery setup. Now the leisure battery was built underneath this false floor that we built. Now what's great is the false floor under here is a good hiding space. You could put your camera or laptop or anything under there. There's quite a lot of space in it. But just behind it, located in this kind of covered and vented space for the battery, is a full-size leisure battery. Now the leisure battery is wired in here. It runs to a fuse box on the inside of the cupboard here, and then it goes up to this little control panel here that we fitted on the outside of the cupboard. And this is really your control panel for everything that is powered or can be powered that's not being run off the starter battery. So you have obviously a 12 volt socket here, which is great for plugging in, you know, a whole host of and variety of chargers. You then have this, which could turn on the Bluetooth radio. So the radio in the front we rewired so that it wasn't running off this battery in the alternator, but was rather running off the leisure battery. So when you started or stopped to for the night, you could connect your phone, play it through the speaker system in here, and not have to worry about that draining the starter battery for the morning. You also have a voltmeter here, so you can just tell the voltage of the leisure battery. You have this, which then allows you to turn on the lights. We've got a nice cool light here at the back. I wanted something a little bit more, I wouldn't say clinical, but a bit cooler for the kitchen area. And then just above the camera there, we've got a slightly warmer light that we can use for the living area, you know, to create mood zones. That's what interior design is all about. And then over here, you've got some USB plugs that you can turn on as well. Really proud of this. Really proud. I didn't build this. My dad is a lot better at electrics than I am, in the sense that he knows how electrics work and I don't. So when I was working at sea one day, I heard that he was doing this, and I came back home and he had built out this incredible electrical system. Now, the other thing that is missing is the cool box that is normally stored here. The cool box could usually be run off this 12 volt system here as well. So the 12 volt system would basically run the cool box, keep it cool throughout the day, and you could then leave that on at night as well. These are things that I don't have in my 2018 camper van that I'm currently building. I mean, a lot of this stuff is stuff that you would kill for in a full-size van. So the fact that we managed to fit this into one of these smaller vans is something that I was always really impressed by and really proud of. I also had a full internet system running off this. I used to have a 12 volt adapter for a small portable router, and what it could basically stick in here, and it could give me full 4G internet that would run off a separate SIM card. It worked now and then. The problem, of course, is that the signal around here was pretty spotty. But again, the fact that I could set up, get my laptop set out on this table here, unfold it, sit down, turn on the internet, turn on the music, open up my kitchen, and then start making myself a cup of coffee. Unbelievable. It completely changed my approach to travel and exploring around Scotland. Before that, you know, I didn't really use my car that much, but I'd maybe go out camping now and then and stuff. But this kind of made me realise, like, hold on, I can go anywhere. I can do anything here in Scotland with this little van. Really, really incredible. I also had what I called here my library, which is basically a little area where I kept my maps, and also I kept all of my books as well. Fire extinguisher too, now of course terribly out of date. Something that I do need to fit to my new camper van as well too. But yeah, really, really proud of this little setup and this little design that we had. Now, final thing, that I haven't really mentioned is, or well, I alluded to, is the pop top in here. The foldable roof that extends up. You can sort of see it in here right now. This place, when you wanted to get into bedroom mode, was really quite fun. What you would do is you'd fold up all the doors, or close all the doors. You would then bring around all these curtains, button it all up, have this roof set up, and then you had yourself a really cozy interior that really felt, despite the fact that there are windows everywhere, quite secluded and quite private. So I'll do that for you now. I will set up the van in the sleep mode, and you can see what it looked like on a typical day when I had this thing set up. Oh, ta-da! So this is it. This is the van fully buttoned up, as I call it. As you can see, the roof is now at its full span. You might be able to tell I can actually pretty much stand up fully in here. The curtains now surround the interior. You may notice a small design choice I made, that the PSP in its holder can actually fit underneath the curtain in case I wanted to lie in bed and watch some television. And this whole setup is really because, you know, the thing is, the van has so many windows, it's really advantageous to have the ability to completely close out the outside world. It still lets in a lot of light though, and my new van, I actually opted to get a van that has absolutely no windows in the back, because I actually prefer being able to have the option to have no light coming in whatsoever. It's easier to get light into a van than it is blocking it all out, I found, when it's very, very bright. But as you can see, here is the bed folded out fully, and here is my sort of jerry-rigged captain's seat, that instead of the seat being able to spin round, what we did was I would fold the seat pretty much forward, slide the driver's seat as forward as possible, and then I would use one of these cushions and set it down at the back of the seat, and you could then sit like this. Now, I've put the table away, but I'd often have the table then unfolded. You could be typing away, working on your computer. You've got your bed laid out there as well. And as you may have been able to see when I was showing you the storage from earlier on, you don't really ever need to be storing anything here, aside from maybe if you wanted to take a duvet with you instead of a sleeping bag. But all your food can be stored in the food cabinets. All of your camera gear and your rucksack can be stored in that cupboard. You've obviously got the food cooler here as well in case you need to keep anything there. So all of this space is available to you. That's what I've found most important when you are camping. It's not so much about the size of the vehicle, it's whether you can make sure that you have places to keep all of the stuff within it. Anything can seem tidy and spacious if you have a place for all the things that you're taking with you. And that's kind of what I learned the most with this van more than anything else. But yeah, this is the nighttime mode. And as you can see, got some lighting here. In fact, I better turn this back on again. And as you can see, a nice warm light from what looks to be the most old lighting system I've ever seen in my life. This was originally fitted in the van, but I didn't want to remove it because it generates such a lovely warm light in here, especially at nighttime. It was remarkably cozy. It's a very, very nice experience staying in here. I had a lot of fun with this van. Travelled up to Orkney. I went up to a lot of the islands in Orkney with this van. Travelled to Hoy, which is a beautiful island on Orkney, and camped out there, climbed several hills, used this as a sort of base of operations as I did that. Yeah, a lot of good memories in here with that. I mean, it's incredible to think I drove sometimes 200, 250 miles in this thing. I took this thing up to John O'Groats. I have a photo of it outside or next to the John O'Groats sign. And you know, I mean, this thing, again, it's incredibly loud. You're sitting on top of the engine. It is so noisy. It is so unbelievably imprecise and uncomfortable in some ways. But you know what? When you've got your music playing, when you get into the midst of it, it's really not that bad. You know what it did teach me more than anything else? This van has made me grateful for every single other car that I've owned. The driving of a Suzuki Jimny, which is not famed for its driving experience, was so much more comfortable than this. It felt like such an upgrade. And now getting a slightly more modern van, it feels like driving a Rolls Royce in comparison to this. So yeah, it taught me a lot, certainly as well. Nice place to be, quite cozy. So yeah, that has been the Suzuki Jimny. No, Suzuki Super Carry. I've got too many Suzukis. One of my favourite little vehicles ever. It's called Bamse, in case anyone wondered. B-A-M-S-E. Actually, I think the Norwegian pronunciation is Boomse, but it means teddy bear, I believe, in Norwegian. But it's actually named after Sea Dog Boomse, which was a famous World War II dog that served on a Norwegian minesweeper, I think. Look it up. It's an amazing story. There's a statue of Boomse in Scotland. Down on the east coast. But yeah, I bought this van in 2015, like I mentioned, and at that time it was my first vehicle that I ever bought, and it was I was in an odd place. I was working at sea at the time, and actually a friend of mine had very recently passed away, and I kind of had this idea of, well, you know what, I should stop messing around. I should buy a nice vehicle. I ended up with this. But it was a time in which I thought, you know what, I should stop just messing around and just dive in and just buy something. See something cool, see something I like, and not think about the practicalities of it, but just get it. And I did. And it was unbelievable. The content, the stories, the experiences that I got out of it were fantastic. Probably the most incredible thing was, along with obviously taking it home, was that this was the van that my sister turned up to her wedding in. In 2018, the van had been off the road for a couple of years at that point, and we raced, in fact, sorry, 2019, we raced to get the engine put back in, because the engine had been out. I had taken it apart in so many different ways and tried to put it back together, and we're working on brakes and various things and trying to get it running again. And my sister said, I want to be taken up to the wedding venue in this. So we just worked our proverbial arses off to get this thing back on the road in time. And what do you know? Roll around her wedding day, up turns this ridiculous little van, still decorated to this day with some of the decorations that we put on her. My sister climbs in, me and my dad and her drive up to the wedding venue, and she gets out in this van. And it's in all the wedding photos. Absolutely fantastic. And I made a wee video that I put online just to kind of highlight reel of it, and it genuinely made me a bit emotional. Maybe my sister getting married should have been the thing that made me emotional, but no, it was the van, because the van had been off the road for so many years and it represented so much to me. And just for this one day, for this one moment, it had its day out. It had its day in the sun where it was dolled up and prettied up, and then delivered her to the aisle, I suppose, which was, yeah, really, really touching. And not my suggestion. Funnily enough, my sister came up with that idea. I hadn't suggested it, and looking back, I wouldn't have suggested it because of the amount of work that it took to get it back on the road again. I alluded to it earlier though, but my time with this van might be coming to an end. It's not been on the road in years. RASE is a bit unique in that you can run vehicles on the island here without an MOT, but even to get her to that state is very difficult. I need to get her taxed, I need to get her through an MOT first in some ways, and it's a need a lot of welding. There's engine troubles and various things that I just don't have the time to deal with anymore. I may have already mentioned it. I've got a lot of vehicles. I've got a Suzuki Jimny. I've got my new van, which is a Nissan NV200. I've got my tractor. I've got a Ferguson tractor, which I've shown in previous videos. I'm trying to build a house right now. I've got a full-time job. I'm working, making YouTube videos. We've got about 8 or 9 different boats. We've got 100 different projects on the go. And this van, unfortunately, is just languishing and not doing anything. And it's a difficult thing to sort of come to terms with the idea that you've got to give something like this up. I mean, cars are so much more than just, you know, the rusty sum of their parts. You know, we have a real emotional connection to these things because of the literal time and memories that we have built and invested into it. You get to a point, though. There's a point, I think, in which you have to recognize, do I hold on to something and use it as a way of kind of immortalizing these times that I had, as a kind of memorial to all this fun and interest that I had with this time in my life? And hopefully maybe use it, improve it, and maybe build more memories on top of that, which is something, if you see my videos, I like to do. I like repurposing and reusing old things. But on the other hand, something that you could maybe look at and recognize is that, you know, the time that we have with things is fleeting, and the time in which I had with this is kind of past. The fun and the enjoyment that I had with it is something that I had several years ago now at this point. And I think holding on to it is less me immortalizing it and enjoying it, and more me sort of just being nostalgic about it and not really seeing it or using it for what it could be. I think sometimes you have to recognize that if you want to do more things and finish more projects and make more memories, you have to kind of let go of some of the older stuff that you've got in your past. And this is one of those things. It's just been sitting, doing nothing, and not really gaining any new memories or any value in that kind of way. Funnily enough, the reason I stopped driving this is because one day when I went for a walk outside of this van, I fell off a cliff and broke my hip. And since that day, the van basically went into a garage, and when I got back on my feet again, I had other projects that took off, and it basically just sat and never got back on the road fully again. And I think my tenure with the van really ended on that day, and everything else past that has just been me sort of kind of holding on to it for a variety of different kind of sentimental reasons. So this is the 1989 Suzuki Super Caddy. This is my van, or at least it was, but I think it is time that I maybe look at giving it up. If you are interested in a van like this, I don't know, get in contact. If you feel you can give it a home, it needs a lot of welding, it needs a lot of work, but you never know. Maybe there's someone out there who could maybe make use of this and maybe create their own memories with it in some way. But anyway, I am going to go and, well, tidy this back up because I've made a right mess making this video. And yeah, I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay, I think she's finally ready. Welcome to Bamsey. This is my 1989 Suzuki Super Caddy camper van conversion. It's a mouthful, but she's ready for the open road. I am taking her up to Orkney. It's going to be her longest journey to date, and I'm pretty damn excited. I'm pretty damn nervous. I've got her pretty much packed though. I'll give you a little tour, however. I've got my bag with my go bag with all my little bits and bobs, cooler, Stanley, my ever trusty thermos, got my tripod under here, duvet, cushions, I got gear stashed under here. Go around to the back, got my jacket. This is the kitchenette area. So, well, this cup's slightly in the way. Got a wee sink. That's right, it is electrically water powered. Sink with a tap, and there's a wee kind of sump at the bottom there that comes out of. You've also got a cooker under there with a grill. I've got all my various books on top. Underneath here, gas. Underneath there, water and various tools and various things. And that's about it really, but she's looking beautiful.